Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm taking a look at the Hot Toys T-800 battle damage version from the original Terminator film. Let's see how it turned out. Alright, first up as always, I'm going to take a look at the packaging. It's a very cool little modification of the shoebox design. There's a bit of a cutaway thing there below the T-800 leading into the artwork within, which I'm afraid I failed to illustrate in the video shooting, and I'm sorry for that. I don't typically call out the credits scenes other than to say here they are, but I have to say what they've done here with the credits using the typeface that we typically see from the T-800's point of view, it's pretty awesome. It's a great way to go about doing things. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever done that before. The artwork itself has a bit of a vibe from Tech Noir. I'm not sure. I think that might have something to do with the original one sheet poster. I'd have to look that up. Anyway, but let's get to the guts of the thing, almost literally in terms of the battle damage. And wow, look at those guns. Both figuratively and literally, as it turns out, because this is a serious muscular figure body. And of course, all the weapons that he comes with was what I was originally talking about. But anyway, moving beyond. The battle damage is up front from the get-go. There's no clean version of this costume. It already comes shot up. Of course, there's two versions of the head sculpt, which is nice. You get the relatively clean version with just the cut-out eye from his previous surgical thing that he did to himself, and as well as the really scuffed-up version. Removing the back of the head reveals the electronics. Just pull out a tab right there to get the batteries to activate. And then there's a small button in the back that I'll illustrate later on down the line to show you exactly how that effect plays out. It's kind of nice in that the way they've done it is to put the light on a timer. So you don't have to continually go back and turn it off every time that you want to show off that effect. I've not known any other Hot Toys figure to do that, to use that effect, but I think it's something they should consider revisiting in other figures as well, especially those that come with a lightsaber, for example. All right, let's pose this thing up. This is the second version of this figure that I had. The first one that I traded to a coworker because he had a figure that I really desperately wanted. To be honest, I can't even remember which one it was at this point. I think it might have been Ironmonger. But I traded it to him and then went ahead and got my hands on another one as quickly as I could. On this particular figure, the joints seem looser than I remembered on my original figure. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's been sitting in a box for at least 2 years. I don't know. It was just a bit more challenging to work with. Not overly much. I mean, I was able to hit a good solid pose with it right out of the gate. The only real challenge for me was the hands, trying to get the hands on the body. But again, as I've mentioned in other videos, it might have been because of my cold studio. And of course, I'll have to take steps to remedy that at some point in time. Working with this pose here, which is something that comes to my mind every time that I think about the Terminator in that scene in the police precinct. Trying to get those elbows to bend like that is really pushing that jacket. So I'm going to caution anyone who wants to use caution, because although the jacket seems relatively tough, relatively durable, and it's certainly a bit flexible, it's soft, it's small, it's pleather, and that stuff can be just a little bit fragile. Another thing to call out is that something to do with this muscular figure body, you can't really get those legs to go back past the perpendicular mark to the table. This is frustrating to me because many of my poses I tend to have the figure arches back a little bit, just in a more melodramatic way. So what I've done here is to sort of opt for the Terminator being in mid-stride a little bit. Something else that I had an issue with was these clips. First of all, I tried putting them in the shotgun, and that's just not going to work. When I was putting them in the rifle, I realized that they're a little bit loose. I haven't done anything about that just yet, but what I'll probably wind up doing is just using a slight little sliver of double-sided tape shoved into the receiver. Initial pose is dialed in, looking pretty good. I'm not quite keen on the angle of his head, so I think I'm going to make a minor adjustment here. Yes, and yeah, that's going to look a lot better. Now what I've just done there, and what you're not going to be able to see because my hands are in the way and taking the figure off camera, is to turn on the light. Again, take off the back of the head, just like you're seeing me do there. Little strip of plastic in the middle to keep the batteries from contacting each other while in storage. Pull that out, and that little button right there, just use your fingernail, thumbnail, whatever, to click it. Once you hear it click or feel it click, put the head back on, spin it around, and you've got a light. Now I realize this is going to make it look like he's leaning really far back, but if you see at the bottom there, the camera's actually at an angle, so it's a bit exaggerated. The photos do a much better job of showing what it's going to look like. I have to acknowledge that Terminator 2 is definitely the superior of the two films directed by James Cameron, but nothing beats a classic, and you may have noticed that I can't resist the pull of nostalgia, and this was my first baby. This was probably the first R-rated movie that I ever saw in my life. I was very young at the time. And I wasn't at my parents' house, I was at a friend's house, his parents were much more liberal with what they allowed us to watch than my own were. It was an eye-opener for me. It was terrifying and magnificent to see the way that James Cameron had taken so many great elements of sci-fi, from time travel to laser guns, futuristic murder bots chasing a young woman in order to kill its enemy in the future, and to drag in the horror of a zombie, essentially. That's basically what the Terminator is. He's a cyborg zombie who's going after Sarah Connor, not for her brains, but for her offspring. There's a primal horror that engenders. I won't even bring up the beauty of a four-dimensional romance. I mean, the thing between Kyle and Sarah, that was just awesome. But while the story is theirs, the movie is all about Arnold, and this look, the latter half of the film, this is the look that established the Terminator as a leather-clad, gun-toting, motorcycle-riding cyborg juggernaut, which is why I chose this Terminator figure to represent the franchise on my shelf. Hope you enjoyed the review. Tune in next time, and until then, be good to your plastic.